Okay, our speaker, waiting in the wings. Our speaker is Courtney Warnsman. Many of you already know her. She is a senior VP of it's kind of like an executive job search coaching company where they help uh, executives find jobs, and they give them all those the job search skills plus the extra little extras that you need to do when you're really looking for a senior level job. It's kind of off the charts, and the company is called Career Connections. Her presentation, this is going to be part one of a two-part presentation. Part one is manage your mind, and part two is then manage your time. I need help in both. My mind, it's just all right. Why do you think you should listen to her? Because number one, she has a PhD. She has been a career development facilitator for nearly 20 years. She works at Austin Career Connections in Austin, delivering career transition and development services to individual clients across functional roles and industries. In addition to her full-time work, she currently serves on the board of the National Career Development Association, as well as executive development program consultant for the Baylor University Executive MBA program. She has recently been tapped to serve on the advisory board of a startup venture exploring the unique challenges that women have experienced as they have either chosen or been forced to step back professionally during the COVID-19 pandemic. Sadly, that is the case. All the advances that women have made have taken a bit of a backsliding. Courtney's past endeavors include being the resident resume tweaker for the Launchpad Job Club, as well as a member of the Graduate Dean's Advisory Group at the University of Texas. This is a group dedicated to developing career services programs for doctoral candidates who do not want to work in the academy. In academia, I think that's supposed to be, who do not want to work in academia. Courtney combines knowledge, humor, and tough love when helping people reach their career goals. She says career transition can be a stressful time. I strive to lighten the load a little, providing advice and direction, of course, but more importantly, giving a laugh, a hug, a kick in the pants when warranted, and you'll love it. She received her bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees in education from the University of Texas at Austin. And we're giving her a late start, but Courtney, take all the time you want. We don't have anything else coming after you. So let's give a warm Launchpad welcome to Courtney Warnsman.
Good morning, everybody. I am so glad to be back talking to Launchpad, and I'm actually so glad we're getting a late start, because how else would I have learned that if you go like this during a presentation, you're bored, So Kathy, thank you for sharing that, because hopefully that will, if I see anybody looking like they're picking their nose, I know I need to, like you said, step it up.
Your daughter will like it, believe me.
She will love it. And speaking of my daughter and changes during the pandemic, I have mentioned to her not to come through right now, but at any time we might be Zoom bombed by a fourth grader and or a dog. So I apologize in advance for any of that might happen. So I want to go ahead and share my screen here, and we're just going to jump right in. I'm going to start the presentation by saying actually very little. I want to introduce you via slides to a woman named Julie. And Julie is a friend of mine who I am friends with on Facebook. And, we all several weeks ago went through the craziness of the ice storms and all of that. And I was following Julie's post on Facebook, and I got her permission to share these with you. So I'm just going to click through and keep my mouth shut for a moment and give y'all the opportunity to experience Julie to start out. So here's Julie. Okay, I don't know about you, but when I hit the slide and I play the sound of the water pouring into the kitchen after the ice, my heart actually starts pumping a little bit, remembering the struggles that we were all having a few weeks ago. But here we are. The first slide was from February 15th, as Julie had been without power and that was growing. Sadly, her particular hamster had not hibernated. But then February 24th, 9 days later, we're back to our regularly scheduled program and celebration hugs are the best. Now, Julie's resilient, okay? And that's what we're going to be talking about today, is about resilience. And as I was looking at the calendar today, it hit me that today, or actually yesterday by date, or today by event, which is the Friday before spring break, is exactly 1 year since all of our worlds changed. I picked up my then third grader from school and brought her home expecting to spend a week of fun in spring break and then to go back to school. And she hasn't been back since. And if you think at about all of the things that we've all been going through, those things can be really stressful. Before we get into that, I want to start with a little quiz. So while I'm yapping here for a couple of seconds, if you would pull just a piece of scratch paper, we're going to do an assessment on your current resilience. And as we think about it, since a year ago, we have dealt with the pandemic. We have gone through all the race issues with Black Lives Matter. It was an election year. We went through the race, I'm sorry, not the race, the Capitol riots. We went through the ice storm. And then on top of it, those of you who are here are also looking for jobs. Now, we all are born with some resilience inside us, but normally we tap that for short periods of time. An event happens, we can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and we just power through and get there. But what the research is saying about the past year is that it's harder to be resilient because we don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. It just all keeps happening and it keeps coming at us. I hope that we're beginning to see the light at the end of the tunnel. I volunteered at one of the COVID vaccination clinics last week, and it was amazing, the smiles and the high fives in gloved hands or high elbows that people were doing because they were so excited about getting a shot. I mean, whoever thought that getting poked in the arm would be something that would start to allow that resilience to come back. So I hope that you have all gathered your sheets of paper right now. I want to thank Sharon Givens, who is the president-elect of the National Career Development Association, for allowing me to use this assessment that she created. I'm going to go through their 15 quick questions, and I want you to rank yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being low, 10 being high, on these aspects of resilience. So I'm going to go through them fairly quickly because I don't want you to spend a lot of time thinking about it and overthinking. I want you to put in the first thing that comes to mind. Scale of 1 to 10. Here we go. The first one. I accept myself for who I really am. 2, I am confident in my ability to cope with adversity. 3, I'm good at communicating and interacting with others in times of stress. 4, I have adequate support from friends and family. 5, I'm good at facing challenging problems in life and solving them systematically. By the way, there are 15 questions, just so you know. 6, I have the ability to cope with my emotions in the face of adversity. 7, I laugh often. 8, I'm flexible. 9, I'm able to say no. 10, I'm comfortable asking for help. 11, I know how to set boundaries. 12, I can calm myself down. 13, I have self-control and discipline. 14, I'm hopeful about the future. 'And finally, I'm open to change. Now, take just a moment to tally up your scores, and then I'll show the results screen. If you're like me, you need to pull out your calculator right quick, because math was not my thing, and I would not be able to do this math in my head. But take just a moment to tally those scores, and then we'll talk a little bit further. We'll talk a lot further, actually. Okay, so here are the results. For those of you who got above 125, I'm in a really good place. Life is great. You can log off right now because you don't need to hear anything I'm going to say. Not true. We all have our moments, right? 99 to 124, I have adequate coping skills. 73 to 98, I need to develop some coping skills. 47 to 72, I need some support to enable me to rebuild. Below 46, it's probably outside of my my direct ability to be able to do this without getting someone on the outside. Now, keep in mind that this is an informal assessment. Please don't take it as gospel, but I do want you to kind of get an idea from this of where your resilience lies, because that resilience is what allows you to maintain your energy driving forward. Lack of resilience is what can get you to sort of spiral down into that place of negativity. So we're going to be working today on looking at some of what your triggers are that get you wound up, as well as some strategies to intentionally tap into that resilience as you need it. So I love this definition of stress. Stress happens when the pressure you're feeling is greater than the resources and tools that you have to deal with it. And as I mentioned just a minute ago, the past year has been so stress laden with so many things going on. And then with all the stuff just going on in the world in general, you either maybe were laid off because of the pandemic, maybe you were laid off prior to the pandemic, and then the pandemic hit and it's like, oh, great, now what do I do? Kathy mentioned just a minute ago that companies are still hiring, things are slow, but things are still going on. Another thing that I want to add to that as an aside is that in the past, where gaps in employment were such a concern and we were wanting to try to hide those, companies are not blinking an eye right now at gaps in employment. They understand what the market is. And so as long as you're able to tell your story about that gap, I want to relieve your concerns right now about gaps since pandemic time, because companies get it. They're having to be resilient as well. So anyway, we have all been having a lot of stress in looking at maybe or maybe not having the resources and tools that we need to cope with all these things that are being thrown at us right now. What they often create are what we call blue thoughts. Thoughts that are too negative to possibly be true thoughts, and they create undue stress. So blue, if we look at it, the acronym, B is for blaming yourself. Maybe you have had several rejections, which my guess is we all have. And you're automatically going, what did I do wrong? What's wrong with my experience? Why doesn't anybody want me? That interview was bad. I answered that question wrong. And there's a constant self-blame about what's going on. But it's important to remember right now that a lot of what's happening is circumstantial. There may be absolutely nothing that you are doing incorrectly, doing wrong, nothing wrong with your experience. It's just the circumstances that surround it. One of the things that I did at one of my Launchpad presentations a couple of years ago, if I had $100 bill right now, and I had one of you sitting in front of me, and it was a nice, crisp, clean $100 bill, I would hold it out to you and say, here's $100, no strings attached. It's my gift to you. You want it? And you say, sure, and you'd start to take it. And then I would grab it back from you, and I'd crumple it up, and I'd throw it on the ground, and I'd stomp on it, and I'd pour my drink on it. And then I'd pick it up, and I would hand you this wet, crumpled up $100 bill and say, here's $100. It's my gift to you, no strings attached. Do you still want it? And you know what? You're still going to take that $100 bill from me. Why? Because that $100 bill still has value. And so as we look at this blaming yourself piece of this, I want you to picture yourself as that $100 bill. You have value. You had value in your last job. You did not lose that value, even in the wake of layoffs and pandemics and all of this other stuff going on. So you've got to try to quit blaming yourself for things. Be as prepared as you can, but keep in mind a lot of this is circumstances. The L is when we're looking for bad news. I heard this phrase fairly recently, and I love it, doom scrolling. We all have this thing that we walk around with in our pockets, and when we're standing in line, we're scrolling through Facebook, we're scrolling through the news, we're scrolling through all this stuff. And of course, everything that's popping out at us is negative. Gas prices are up, employment is down, all this stuff. And it just feeds any of the concerns that you may have already had up until now. So the doom scrolling and the constantly having on 24-hour news. For those of you who know me, I often say I think 24-hour news was the downfall of society, because have to keep saying something to fill that time. So we have to resist our urges for that doom scrolling. Unhappy guessing. You know, they probably wouldn't want me because just kind of putting things out there. Well, I guess they didn't like what I said. I guess that job isn't going to pay enough. I guess no one ever wants me. And then the E is for being exaggeratedly negative. And this is where you use words like, no one's hiring. Never is anyone going to hire me. Just this constant, I'm going to age myself here, the constant tape. I don't think we have tapes that play anymore, but this constant tape, or the constant thing that's looping in your head all the time, that's just negative, 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 negative. And our goal through resilience is to find ways to replace those blue thoughts with what we call true thoughts that are freeing your mind from all that negativity. I'm going to take just a moment here, and I'm going to open a poll. These bullets here are some blue thought triggers. And I'm going to open the poll, and then if there are others that you have, if you would like to share, please go ahead and put them in the chat. Please do not feel like you have to do that. Choose your top 3. Which of these factors are triggers for you as you go through your job search? I'll give you a few moments to do that. Remember, you get 3 choices. Shannon or Kathy, would you please jot down the top 3, because I'd like to use those. It looks like, wow, too old or too young is way up there, 71% of respondents. Then it looks like the close numbers 2 and 3 were another rejection or ghosting, and finances. So too old or too young, another rejection or ghosting, and finances. So we're going to, a little bit later in the presentation, we're going to come back to those blue thoughts and see how we might reshape those into true thoughts. I saw quite a few things going up in the chat. I just saw that they were going. Excuse me, I don't actually have the chat open right now. Let's see.
I can read them.
That'd be great, Kathy. Thank you.
Constantly putting myself out there for review, showing who I am, and then getting rejected for who I am. Lack skills, especially technical skills. Let's see. I think that's
I think
all
that covers it.
see. Experience, lacking experience.
Okay, I think
Too many
that
people out of, too many COVID, too many people out of work equals increased competition equals employers market.
okay. Great. Well, thank y'all all for participating in that. And I think, or one of the things that that shows us is that we're all, experiencing this in a little bit different way. I mean, yes, we're all looking for jobs, but the things that trigger those blue thoughts for us can be or are different from person to person. But we're going to do a little bit of practice here in a little bit for how to change those thoughts. All right, real quick, everyone open up your chat, and I want you to glance at this photo and tell me what you see. What is this? I'm seeing some great stuff coming out. Y'all are getting creative, some about these things that you're looking at. For most of you, and a few of you said 2 different animals. If you look in the chat, you'll see some people are saying a bird, some people are saying a goat, somebody said wow. So, and some of you right now, I say bird and you're going, there is not a bird in there, I see a goat. And vice versa. So I don't know if y'all can actually see my, what is this thing called when I move around the arrow?
Cursor.
Thank you, duh. No, if you can actually see my cursor here. For those of you who saw the bird, you see here is the beak pointing to the left and the eye, and I'm sorry, that the bird pointing to the eye, and then this is its head going backwards. For those of you that saw the goat, this is the ear and the eye, and then the mouth and nose here. Now, some of you are probably looking at it still going, I don't see the goat, or I don't see the bird, or whatever it may be. I'm going to plant something here for you, and that is your first impression of what you saw here. Andrew, greatest of all time, Larry Bird, love it. Your first impression of what you saw here probably is because of some experience you have had in your past, maybe even subconsciously, with goats or birds. Okay, I've done this before, and I had someone say, it's funny, but I grew up in Canada and we lived on a farm and there were goats there. I don't see the bird. No matter how hard you try to get me to look at the bird, I don't see it, and vice versa. So keep that in mind. Now, I'm going to go a little bit different direction with this next one. So this was a what do you see? With this next slide, I would like for you to put in the chat what thoughts or feelings come to mind when you see this. Oops. There you go. Okay, I've been watching this and I'm giggling a little bit here. I'm going to ask a couple of you, if you'll indulge me here, to tell me why you wrote what you wrote. And the first one is Sam. You wrote future vision. Sam, would you unmute yourself for just a moment and tell me what that's about? Okay, Sam. It's okay. All right. The other then is Anne. You said childhood.
Yes, I did.
What brought that up for you?
The double bubble reminds me of childhood. Like the instant I saw it, I could taste what that tasted like, and I could just like feel what it was like to start chewing it.
Yep. And so for you, that's a very different sort of image than a lot of the things that are on there. I just saw Jeff put in more exercises and, oh my gosh, if I eat that, I'm going to need some. People were putting in diabetes, the dentist, all these kinds of things. And so again, even just a simple image like this conjures up very different feelings for different people. I see someone just put, I was too distracted by the super pink donuts. The gum by itself would have said childhood to me too. So they see the donuts and don't even see the gum. And so what we're talking about here, folks, is about perspective. And so when we're talking about being resilient, we have to bring perspective into view. I want to throw a word in here that we're going to call imagination. Not imagination, but imagination. The two images that I just showed you of the bird and the goat, and then the sugar-coated donuts with the double bubble, were images that the way that you viewed that image was based on your perspective. And you're going to hear me say that a whole lot here in the next few minutes. Images have power, folks. So I want to pull this forward to thinking about your images of your career search. When you started looking, even if it was before pandemic, what were the images or the perspective that you already had in your mind going into your search? And Shannon and Kathy, I'm going to ask you how best we can do this. I would love for people to be able to talk. Do we have the hand raising feature here?
Yes, we do have that.
Okay.
It's in reactions.
It's in reactions. Where is it? I'm not seeing it.
Reactions is down at the bottom and on the far right. And when you click on reactions, it's got hand clapping and thumbs up. And at the very bottom, they added raise hand. Maybe you
Okay.
don't have it on yours.
I don't have it on mine. So for those of you, oh, good, but I can see people who've raised their hands. Awesome. So first, Janelle, tell me what images you were carrying with you pre-pandemic. And go ahead and unmute.
Sure. I was just quickly, I was laid off late 2019. And so the job searching and pre-pandemic, the image that first pops into my head is just like cruising in a motorboat, on top of a lake, and the sun is shining and the wind is blowing. So I'm cruising along, making forward momentum and progress.
And then pandemic.
I'm the anchor, and it gets tossed into murky water, and it just gets stuck between some rocks, and then it's like game over.
Okay, so in your head, I want you to be thinking about, and we're gonna do more with this in a little bit. How can we pull up the anchor? How can you get that boat sailing smoothly again? All right, Kim, you have your hand up. If you want to unmute yourself, there you go.
Yeah, my vision is more of feeling discouraged and defeated. So just kind of a small person with a ton of other people that are better than me, or, look better than me, or have a better, on the resume or whatever, in their skill set. And I'm basically invisible because I'm not relevant anymore.
Okay. So think about, I want you all to start envisioning how you might change that image in your head. What do you want that image to look like moving forward? Okay. Let's see. Kathy, did you have your hand up?
Me? No.
Yeah. Okay, those were our two hands then. Anybody else like to share what images you might have been carrying pre-pandemic? Okay, so the visions that we have in our heads, the images that we go to, can really affect how we carry ourselves through a career search. When Kim was talking and she said, she saw this, a little person, herself as this little person invisible in the midst of all this stuff. And Kim, those of you who know me know that when I pick on people, it's all out of love. So please understand that. That's one of those B's. That's one of those blaming yourself. Everybody's better than I am. Everybody's more experienced, or whatever it may be. So for all of you, even those of you who did not share, I want you to be thinking about what those images are in your head. Are they blue images? Are you blaming and doom scrolling and just having these real negative thoughts? Or are those images really reality regarding what's happening? Now, I want to go back to the results of our poll regarding the 3 triggers that most affected people. And I'd like to do a little bit of work here, some brainstorming maybe, about how to shift those thoughts. So I believe the first one was, I'm either too young or I'm too old. So if y'all would take a moment and just put in chat, how might you rephrase that in a way that flips that image from a negative to a positive? If what's in your head is I'm too old, what can you tell yourself instead? And same thing, I'm too inexperienced. What can you tell yourself instead? I love the fine wine vintage there. Lots of experience. Okay. One thing that I want y'all to think about, and this is a positive actually for those of us who are in the senior thing. I know that I always start to, at first it depressed me, but now I actually like that I'm ARP eligible. But for those of us there is something coming out now in research that they're calling the silver surge. And what they're actually saying is that those of us who are more seasoned, young at heart, ready to go, that companies are looking for us to lead and to manage our way out of some of this stuff, because some of the less experienced workers, less experienced professionals, while they do their jobs very, very well, they haven't been through the ringer that some of us have had in our career searches. So I want you to keep that silver surge mantra in your head, because that silver surge may actually be helpful to you. Age implies wisdom. I'm seeing, what did Julia say that somebody said damn right to? Where is that? I'm scrolling up here for whatever Julia said. There you go. Mature, expert, young, you can ready to learn with no bad habits. So hopefully you're all taking those in. Now it's interesting to me that all of these things that I saw come through chat were more on the I'm too old side. I didn't see any come through on the I'm too young and experienced side, or young and inexperienced side. Maybe that's just because
We may not have any of those.
Exactly. So anyway, I want you all to then get that piece in your mind, that the silver surge, and start to come up with also some concrete, different ways to say it. When we talk about being experienced, keep in mind that in an interview, your goal is to differentiate yourself from other people. And so when we talk about our age, I've got experience, I've seen it all. Start thinking about ways to use different verbiage, maybe that other people aren't using, that would have somebody stand out and go, whoa. So Andrew just posted, Kathy says, would you want Sully to land the plane on the Hudson River or a newbie? And so the more you can embrace the fact that age is not a negative issue, it's actually value that you bring, and say it in a little bit different way, you're going to grab that interviewer who goes, yeah, I believe that. The other thing, just a little tidbit of information. Thanks, Terry. LOL, I'm not old, I'm just ARP eligible. I'm with you there. Also, one of the things that I've advised some of my clients to do is to see if they can get recommendations on LinkedIn from people who are less experienced in the workplace, who are our mid-management age, millennials, all of that, because that starts to show a company that we as older people, I didn't just say that, we as more experienced people, who Kathy used to say, they're going to wonder if we can get our job done without, drooling all over ourselves. Not only do we not drool, but we have people from the younger generations talking about how great we are, and it automatically sets you up then to be able to build those relationships and such. What was number 2 on our poll? I remember.
It was another rejection, ghosting.
Okay, another rejection and ghosting. So let's put in the chat, or if someone would like to raise their hand again and share why they mentioned that, would love to hear about it. What is it about those rejections that drive you nuts, folks? No comment there. That may be because we've experienced so much of it that it's driving us nuts. And so Julia, yes, that's that ghosting. And I believe that, frankly, ghosting happens because we as humans, it's human nature that we don't want to deliver bad news. And so we don't hear anything. And, I would just like to have somebody say, we've gone a different direction. But with these rejections, I want you to think back again to our blue thoughts. Do those rejections make you think, what did I do wrong? Why didn't they want me? Do you go into that pile? Or do you adopt the thought process that some of my salespeople will have? And maybe some of you are here who are into sales, where I've had them tell me, you know what? It takes at least 10 no's before a yes. So for every rejection I get, bang, we're getting closer to the yes, bring it on. And I've had people actually sort of make it a competition with themselves of seeing just how many rejections they can get before they get to that 10th one that's going to be the yes. Susan, I agree. I was raised to send thank you notes when given a gift. I think the same applies here. I think the communication from the other side tends to be lacking. Let's see, Kim, they don't know me, but if I could get in front of them, they would see my value. The resume isn't enough to judge me. Absolutely. And that, I think, is one of the biggest struggles in the pandemic right now, is that we're not all out shaking hands and networking and going to group things and meeting new people and being able to get there. And you're right, a resume, no matter how great the resume is, it doesn't tell the whole story. And this is something that we were talking about. I hold something called Tuesday Talks once a month for people who are in my field across the nation. And one of the things that's coming out in terms of cover letters is the importance of telling your story. And so, you've got the resume that has your experience and your skills and your accomplishments and all of these things. But people want to hear our stories now. And so those cover letters are becoming even more important because we are not having the ability to get in front of people at the same rate that we were pre-pandemic. Ken, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I in my former life, I did a lot of training of actors, and actors can do sometimes 6 or 7 auditions a day. So rejection is a way of life. And there were 2 things that we would concentrate on. One is your interviewer is not paid as a consultant to give you this feedback. They're busy trying to find that person to fill their job. So they don't have the time to call all the people that weren't right and give them feedback on what they need to do to become more right for their job. Their job is to find that person. So that's understandable that they're not going to get back to you. The second thing is to there were so many people that I dealt with that took that rejection personally, that they are rejecting me as a person, that I am no good, that I'm not worthy. Instead of, they didn't like what I did. They didn't like how I presented it. They didn't like something that I have control over to fix. And dissecting yourself from what you did gives you that advantage of, okay, let's do it again, and I'll try something a little different.
Yep.
So those are my only two adds to that.
No, and thank you for sharing that, because again, it gets back to that B on the blue thoughts, that blaming yourself and internalizing that rejection as something wrong with you, rather than just recognizing it's part of it. Y'all are actually, I'm skipping ahead a little bit here, but y'all are actually going to have some homework coming out of this session today. And one of them is going to be to watch a TED Talk that some of you may have seen called 100 Days of Rejection. And without giving away the specifics, there was a person who had been rejected and rejected and rejected, and it kept on smacking him in the forehead. He finally said, you know what? I have got to figure out how to get beyond this. And so he set up 100 days of ridiculously crazy tasks that he expected to get rejection on, to try to kind of steel himself to that. But you'll see that there in a moment. But it's a really, really good TED Talk. I also saw here that Shannon mentioned JobScan. Absolutely. JobScan is an amazing tool to help you kind of get an idea of what the ATS systems are seeing in your resume. The other piece, of course, that I know that you're all being coached to do is find someone on LinkedIn in that organization. Try to get your information in the hands of someone who is going to be looking for what you do bring to the table, rather than looking to weed you out. That's the purpose of an applicant tracking system, is to weed people out. And so reach out to people. Someone's hand went up just a minute ago and then went back down again. So I want to give that person, do you still have something that you would like to say? Okay, Terry.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've made it past the applicant tracking or whatever. I've made it past the recruiters doing a ton of interviews. And to me, it's very wearing to put yourself out there, to say, this is who I am. And you do that over and over again and get turned down over and over again. Maybe while you were talking, it kind of hit me as this is what I do rather than this is who I am. And maybe I need to separate that out a little bit, because I feel like I'm personally being turned down often rather than just, this is what I do.
Well, and don't even think about, I would take that a step further. I agree with you. I mean, I wouldn't even look at it as rejection of what you do. I would look at it as being not the right fit. And I know we hear that word fit all the time, but if you think back, those of you who have had relationships, we date before we marry, or we date before we become life partners. We date, and we do that to see if there's a fit. And if there isn't, and we don't wind up having that long-term relationship, it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with either one of us. It just wasn't the right fit. And I look at jobs in the same way. A job interview is sort of like dating. The company is looking to see if you're right for them. You're looking to see if they're right for you. And if it works, great. We're going to establish this hopefully long-term professional relationship. If it doesn't, it just wasn't the right fit. And I know this sounds fluffy and frou-frou, but I often say that if you don't get a job, it's because it wasn't the right fit. When the right job is there, you will feel it. It will feel easy from the application, through the interview, through the whole thing. It'll just feel natural, and you'll know it. So if you can just embrace the fact that it's not a rejection of either you or your skills, it's a determination that there isn't a fit. And keep in mind that goes both ways. There are probably times when you have pulled yourself out of conversations because the company wasn't a right fit for you. Kathy.
I had remembered this, but I couldn't remember the details, but I just looked it up. When they were trying to cast the lead in Gone with the Wind, that practically every famous actress who was alive within a certain age group applied or auditioned for that job, including Lucille Ball, Joan Crawford, Betty Davis, Katharine Hepburn, Lana Turner, Tallulah Bankhead, Paulette Goddard, and they all were rejected. And when at the last minute, in came Vivian Lee, and it was obvious to everybody that she was the one. And it didn't mean that those other women were not beautiful and talented and could act like crazy and, would have done perhaps an excellent job, but she embodied it. She was exactly the right person for that role.
Got it. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's great. I've also heard that. Was it on Michael Jordan, or one of the major basketball players who was told, you will never make it in basketball? Or I can't remember exactly who
it was. It was Michael Jordan.
Yep. So Celia, I love your comment here. Hiring managers are looking for the best fit. If I don't fit, I don't want to be there. That's one of those ways to flip a blue thought to a true thought. If it's not a fit, it's not a fit. It doesn't have anything negative about me, just on we go. Okay. Thank you for sharing that, Celia. All right. And I believe our third answer on the poll had to do with finances. Y'all, that's a tough one, because as you know, we have bills to pay and things to do. I think strategy there is, really sitting down, looking at the budget. I know that you probably all do that. I think a lot of us have found ways to kind of cut back a little bit, or we've been forced to cut back a little bit because we're not all eating out every night and doing all that stuff. Feel free to put in chat or raise your hand about any of those blue thoughts that come around with the financial aspect of this. One thing that I think people are concerned about, and I don't remember if someone said this just a minute ago or if I read it in the chat, but someone said, there are so many applicants out there right now that it's the employer's market in terms of salaries and what they're going to pay, and we don't have any control over that. And while I agree with that in principle, thank you, Sherry. While I agree with that in principle, I also know that from a company perspective, their goal isn't really to lowball people. The last thing they want is to be having people turn over. It costs them a whole lot more money to onboard people and get them trained up and do what they do rather than to have people doing well. So while salaries may be somewhat lower in some circumstances, I'm kind of Pollyanna, but I like to think that companies are still doing the right thing and not just hiring the cheapest person. Let's see, Kathy, being afraid of poverty, homelessness, etc., makes it difficult not to come across as desperate. Absolutely. And this is one of those things that when we talk about tools to handle that stress, and again, we're going to start talking about that shortly, is in preparation for an interview, how can you center yourself to be able to conduct that interview in a way that, at least for that hour or for however the time period is, that desperation is not what is hanging in the back of your head. Thank you for bringing that up. Feels bad to put the additional pressure on my wife to keep us afloat while I try to find another job. I think that is also absolutely a real thing. And so again, it's about those conversations, and how do you help release some of that pressure from yourself so that you can focus your energy on your job search rather than on that worry. And I think that's what a lot of resilience is about. It's about being able to compartmentalize that worry, have a spot for it, but then be able to lock the door on it for a little while you move forward in what you're doing. Any other comments or questions on that before we move on? Okay, thank you for sharing, everybody. I know this can be a kind of a tough topic. So what we're trying to do here is to change the narrative that scrolling, whether it's on your phone or the doom scrolling in your brain. And so resilience plus intentionality equals adaptability. So when we're talking about tools and resources, sometimes you have those tools and resources, but in moments of stress, we forget to go toward them. We forget to call upon those resources that we do have. So what we just did was an exercise in replacing those blue thoughts with true thoughts. One of your assignments today is going to be to write down your top 3 triggers and then to replace those blue thoughts. How can you change the tape that's playing? We want to focus on the facts rather than on the perceptions. Plenty of companies are still hiring. I just need to find the right one. I need to find the right fit. I need to stay in the game. Someone in my network can help me practice communicating via Zoom. Someone earlier mentioned in the chat, if I can just get in the door, I can convince somebody. In a lot of ways right now, Zoom is the closest thing that we have to getting on the door or getting in the door. So the more practice you can do about where to look in the camera, how to be as natural as you can on Zoom, and allow yourselves a little bit of grace in how hard Zoom is. There's research being done on Zoom exhaustion, and that it's just not a normal way for us to communicate. If we're sitting in a room full of people in a meeting, we look at the person who's talking and then we look at someone else, and this sort of Brady Bunch grid of people on the screen in front of us actually does things to our brain. It's not our normal way to communicate. But the more you can practice on Zoom, the more comfortable you can get on it, then that's going to help some with that as well. If I prioritize and plan, I can make it work. I don't know how many of you, I talk to a lot of my clients who will say things like, I sit down at my desk to do my job search, and 2 hours later, I'm still sitting at my desk and I haven't gotten anything done yet. And I think it's this overwhelming sense of, where do I start? So at next week's session, we're going to talk a lot about time management and how to manage your career campaign in a way that you can manage the career search and working with your child who's in virtual school and doing everything on the honey-do list and all of the other things that we're coping with right now. So keep that in mind for next week's presentation. Change the channel in your mind. Get out the remote and click it. And there's ways to do this where you can intentionally relocate mentally to another space. And this is another thing that we're going to talk some about next week. We talked earlier today about the importance of visualizing success, getting that vision in your head. There's another TED Talk that I don't have on the homework that popped back into my mind a little while ago, and it's one called "Draw Your Future" by Linda, I think it's Dubrowski, but it's called "Draw Your Future." And for those of you who have, if art, whether it's just doodling or anything like that is one of your releases, watch that TED Talk, because it really helps with this being able to envision your success as you are moving forward in this. Meditate or do yoga. Now, I will tell you, a few years ago, I thought those were the fluffiest things in the world. I was like, oh, that's for, those people. I don't do that. It's amazing though. And meditation is something that's learned. You're not going to be able to sit down immediately for 30 minutes and clear your mind. There are 2 resources that I'd like to share with you for the meditation and yoga. The one for meditation is one called Headspace, where the person is actually teaching you how to do it. And you start literally in 1 minute meditation segments, and then it grows out to 5 minutes into longer It's a great initially free resource, or you can keep it free as long as you want. But you can also then buy a very inexpensive subscription that has things like dealing with stress or getting to sleep. And so it digs into some more specifics on meditation. For the yoga one, there is one called Do Yoga With Me, and it is also a free site. And if you've never done yoga before, you can choose a 5-minute beginner yoga. And sometimes that combination of physical meditation, if you'll call it that, what I've learned about yoga is that you're so focused on what you're trying to have your body do that all of that negativity is released because you don't have the space in your mind for it to be looping. Walk away from the task and take a break. We're going to talk a lot about this next week, and be intentional with that imagination. Really think about what is playing in your head right now about your job search, and make an intentional effort to change that image. Let's see. So we talked a little about this a moment ago, but I want to open it up for discussion again. If you want to raise your hands for some of your go-tos when you feel yourself sort of going into that negative place and the doom and gloom kind of thing of the job search. What are some of the things that you like to do to pull yourself out of that? Any thoughts? Kathy?
I was going to ask you about 3 things, but one of them is what works for me. So one, you mentioned it a little bit, is some people, and maybe these different things are, some work with some people and some work with others. So one is vision boards.
Yep.
Where people actually have this thing that they look at, and they every morning, and they wake up and they say 3 things of this is where I'm going to be today, or whatever. So neurolinguistic programming, where they say things, they imprint positive things in their brain. And then just the fact that so Paul Freas says walk or hike in the green belt, go outside, do something creative, garden, take a break. When I used to think of a problem situation, if I could go run, and I think it had to do with oxygen in my brain, but I would come back from a run and it would all be resolved.
Yep.
And I would, that solved my problem, gave me the outline of what I was going to talk about. It was, anyway, that I think it has to do with the oxygenation though. But those 3 things.
Thank you. Thank you. And the vision boards, that kind of goes along with that Draw Your Future TED Talk, where your goal with those is to look at what the ultimate vision is, and then kind of reverse the path to get there, so that you think, okay, this is where I want to be. Now, what are the things that I need to do to get there? And then kind of start walking it back, and then getting that plan in place for how to reach that vision, and then envisioning it every single day. Like you said, Kathy, it's waking up with a positive of, okay, here are the 3 things that I need to do to get to that ultimate vision. So thank you for sharing those. Let's see, Alyssa, I saw your hand up.
Yes, sorry, I just put it in the chat. I was just going to say exercise always helps me as well. And just reconnecting with friends and family, whether usually like on Zoom that I haven't talked to in a while, that always helps me kind of reframe things and reset so that I'm feeling a bit more positive.
Okay, sounds great. Kathy, do you have your hand up again, or did I just not put it down yet?
You didn't put it down.
Okay. All right. Other questions, other thoughts regarding things that you can do. I see exercise and connecting with family, clean your house. Oh my. I totally agree with that, in that when I get really stressed, the condition of my house just raises it. You know, when I'm cool, you know, that can be things here and there, but I'm like, we've got to get the house clean. My husband knows that if I say all surfaces clear, that there's going to be some cleaning going on, and look out. So I'm totally with you on that. Ken.
Sorry, it took me a minute to unmute there.
That's okay.
Yeah, the thing that has helped me a lot is I think most of the blue thoughts, at least my opinion of the blue thoughts, is when you are so focused on yourself, where I need this, I need that. And what helps me is going into an interview, I just remind myself that my life is not going to change drastically if I don't get this job. So going into the interview, I simply go, you know, he's the one with the problem. He's the one that put the ad in the paper. He's the one who can't get the job done. He's the one who's losing money on a daily basis because he doesn't have someone like me to help him. So all I have to do is go in there and say, hey, I'm here to help you. Let's get this done. And it takes the pressure of watching me and my desperation and my needs. And all I have to do is help this guy get his job done.
Well, and that idea of helping, that's, you know, when a company is hiring, it's because they need help in certain areas. And so really, when you're going into interview, what you're sharing with them is how you can help them. And so I think that's great. The other thing that when you were talking that hit me was I read a quote once that said, all rejection means is that nothing changes. So the rejection doesn't make anything worse. Doesn't make anything better from the job perspective, but all rejection means that, you know, rejection is basically neutral in terms of how your life is affected moving forward. So if we take rejection as neutral, I think that's another good thought there. So here is your homework. And obviously I'm not going to grade you on it, but one of the things that I think is important is, you know, we go to workshops and we go to sessions and we hear all this stuff like, oh yeah, that sounds great. I really want to do that. And then we don't do anything with it. And so the in one ear and out the other kind of situation. So I'm going to encourage you to do the homework and to do it fairly within the next couple of days while this is still fresh on your mind. So identify your top 3 blue thought triggers. Replace those blue thoughts with true thoughts and make a list of 3 to 5 go-to strategies for when you feel those blue thoughts coming on. Then there are 3 TED Talks here. We already talked about what I learned from 100 Days of Rejection. The second one is called The Riddle of Experience versus Memory. Now, when you first start watching Daniel Kahneman, you're going to be going, oh, this is going to be a long one. Don't stress when he starts talking about colonoscopies. There really is purpose to what he's doing.
Could you say the name of that one again?
The Riddle of Experience versus Memory. And the third one is called Getting Stuck in the Negatives and How to Get Unstuck by Allison Ledgerwood. And it talks about how our brains are actually programmed. It's a whole lot easier to move from positive to negative than it is to move from negative to positive. It's just the way our minds work. And so again, it's giving you some tools there. And then finally, I want to encourage you to channel your inner Julie. If you remember the way I started today's presentation, it was with Julie and the no electricity and the water pouring in through her kitchen and the hamster who unfortunately wasn't hibernating. And then, yay, we have water. And oh my gosh, we're back to soccer games. Channel that inner Julie. It is okay to feel down sometimes. We're human. But what can you do to bring yourself back up, to be able to push forward with that job search, to be able to push forward with what you're doing and really utilize those tools? Finally, final thoughts. Resilience means bouncing back. And that's what I'm talking about there. It's okay to feel down, but you got to bounce back and not find yourself forever trapped in that space. Secondly, it's not what happens, but how you react. I think this is a lot of what we were talking about with the rejection. It happens. Are you going to let that sabotage your efforts? Or are you going to say, okay, nothing changes, on we go? Give yourself a hug. That's another thing that we're missing during the pandemic is that personal touch. And you know, from the time that, you know, we are infants, human touch is important. And so if you're in a situation where you're not able to hug the people close to you and all that, give yourself a hug. Just that human touch is important. And then finally, I hope to see you all here for part 2 next week. And what I want you to work on between now and then is really working on that, clearing your mind of those blue thoughts so that next week we can really look at some strategy for how to fill that space in terms of time management. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for having me back this week. And I've got a bigger thank you, because for those of you who were here last week, you'll remember that one of the things that we talked about was the importance of remembering to utilize your tools. And so as I was preparing for today's presentation, I kept getting myself smacked in the forehead with, yeah, you've known this for years, and it takes a Launchpad presentation for you to re-engage in some of the things that you have been preaching at people forever. So thank you so much for allowing me to remember my own tools to use in these times. So today's, as you remember, last week's presentation, for those of you that were here, was about managing your mind, and it dealt mostly with how to block out that negativity and resilience and how to keep you motivated to do your career search. I hope that some of you had the opportunity to watch the TED Talks that I suggested. Today, we're taking it a step further. We're going to talk for just a few minutes about, with some other research regarding managing your mind in a little bit different way. And then we'll get into some practical application of this for how it specifically fits for your job search. So as I said, last week was about managing your mind in terms of motivation and being positive. This week, it's more looking at the productivity side of your mind. How can you manage your mind in a way that helps you be as productive and effective as you can in your career search? So if the same demographic is here this week as was last week, this little slide or the little statement on the left may make you a little bit nervous. That research suggests that we reach our peak brain performance at the age of 45. Now, I'm a decade past that. And when I first saw this statistic, I was thinking, oh no, I'm beyond hope, you know. But actually, there are ways that we can continue to keep our brain fit, just like with running or jumping or swimming or whatever it is that you do. We can work on fitness for our minds and for our brain too, that again allow us to maintain those peak levels of productivity. But it does take some effort. According to Daniel Kahneman, and this was one of the TED Talks that I mentioned last week, the one called The Riddle of, I believe it's called The Riddle of Memory. He wrote a book called Thinking Fast and Slow. And in that book, he talks about the fact that we make 35,000 decisions every day. Now, that's not as a group. That is each one of us individually. One of the things that we're hearing during the pandemic, when people are talking about, I'm just tired, the number of decisions that we've had to make. Is it safe to go to the grocery store? Can I meet with my family over the holidays? If you have children or grandchildren, with children, is it okay to send them to school? With my grandchildren, can I hug my grandbabies? And even decisions like that, or not just even, decisions like that make it especially difficult. Our brains get tired because we're constantly deciding. And so we need to find a way to renew our brains and re-energize them to be able to give them the energy to make those decisions all the time. I'm going to give a very brief summary of Kahneman's System 1 and 2 brain. We could do a whole year's worth of Friday sessions on Kahneman. It's really interesting stuff. But according to him, we have a System 1 brain and a System 2 brain. System 1 brain is automatic. It's the things that we do without thinking. We just do it. System 2 brain, though, are those thoughts that we have to put some intentional effort into. This is where we're doing rational thinking. Now, you'll notice that most of our thoughts, 98% of them, fall under this System 1 brain. They just happen, the decisions come, it's the decision to wake up in the morning, to walk out the door, whatever it is that you're going to do. That 2% of our thinking can really be taxing on our brains, and we need to get our brains ready to do those things. If you look here at the side-by-side chart, you'll see that there's just a very gentle difference between System 1 brain and System 2 brain. System 1 brain, you walk the dog. You walk the dog around the block every day at the same time, at the same route. That's System 1. You can do that. You can talk on the phone. You can wave at your neighbor. You can dodge the skateboard that's coming down the sidewalk at you. But let's say one day you decide you're going to go on a different route. Well, now you're in System 2 brain. You have to decide which route you're going to go on and how long that route's going to take. And do you need to take an extra poop bag? We always take 2. My dog's a double pooper, which is more information. But either way, the simple act then of walking your dog becomes a System 2 thinking process as you change up your routine a little bit. If you look down at the last one on here, listening to somebody talk, if you're having a one-on-one conversation, that's System 1 brain. But if you are in a crowded room or you're on a Zoom meeting where someone doesn't have their microphone muted and there's stuff going on in the background, all of a sudden your System 2 brain has to kick in to be able to focus on that one person in that crowded room or in the Zoom meeting. Now, System 1 thinking can shift to System 2. I want you to think for a minute here. You're cruising down the road, your radio's up, your favorite song is on. For me, that's either going to be something by the Beach Boys, maybe John Denver. I know I'm dating myself here, but you're singing, you're cruising along, you're drinking your cup of coffee, and you drive into a blinding rainstorm. What do? Give you a moment here to think about that. Your System 1 brain that knows how to drive the car, your hands are on the wheel, all of those things are easy. You drive into a blinding rainstorm and you probably turn down the radio without even thinking about it. Because while you're cruising along on the sunny day, that music is going on in the back of your head and you're singing along and everything's cool. But when you have to concentrate on the road, when you have to focus to try to see through the windshield and looking for that white line, all of those other things that at one time were System 1 thinking, are now System 2. Now they're distractions that need to be turned down or turned off in order for you to drive that car safely. This is the same thing, by the way, I'm sure it's obvious that when they don't want us talking on our cell phones, and even the hands-free piece, that even in talking with someone, it's not just your hands, it's that your brain reaction time is different because that talking, even though it's a System 1 sort of thinking mode, if you have to shift to System 1 on the driving mode for a minute, it takes a little while to turn off the thought process going along with that conversation. So keep in mind as we're talking through this today that there are things that are automatically System 1, are things that are automatically System 2, but there can be some shifting that goes on with those. So let's think about it. We're going to get into this a whole lot more deeply later on in the presentation, but I want you thinking right now about those job search activities that tend to be System 1 or System 2 activities. So you get up in the morning, you scroll through the job boards. Okay, this is not where you are focusing highly on which ones fit and, oh, I need to apply to that one. This is just scrolling through and seeing what's there. That's probably system one. Hitting your fast apply on applications. That's definitely system one. That doesn't take anything. Bam, hit, I've applied. You're done. Checking email. We're going to talk a whole lot more about checking email in just a moment. But all of those, most of the time, are system one activities. System two activities are when you actually have to execute on those system ones. You've gone through, you've seen all this stuff. Okay, now here are some jobs that I really want to apply for. All of a sudden, your brain goes from that automatic kind of scroll to a very deliberate effort at tailoring resumes, writing your cover letters, trying to figure out who a contact is, all of those things that then you have to focus on. Okay, so keep those things in mind as we continue today with the system one and system two thinking. Now, I'm going to read this slide to you because there is a lot to unpack in here, and it's kind of shocking when you look at it. I call it the danger of distractions. This is a quote from a person named Donald Wetmore of the Productivity Institute. So try to wrap your head around this. The average person gets interrupted once every 8 minutes. With 60 minutes in an hour, that's 7 interruptions an hour, 50 or 60 per day. The average interruption takes 5 minutes. Now, let me stop here for a moment. That doesn't mean that whatever interrupted you continues for 5 minutes. It means that it takes your brain 5 minutes to get back fully engaged in whatever it was that you were doing when you were distracted. So put that all together, it totals 4 hours. If we work an 8-hour day, 4 hours of those 8 hours is distracted time, with 80% of those interruptions being considered little value or no value. So with all of that, you're looking at approximately 3 hours of flat out wasted time per day. When I hear clients say to me, well, job search is a 40-hour job, y'all may not agree with me on this, but I kind of shrug my shoulders and go, not so sure. You can do it in under 40 hours if you're not distracted, you're doing it effectively, you're able to focus, you're finding ways to not lose 3 full hours of distracted time in a day. This is from the movie Up, and I'm going to show just a very, very brief video here that I think we have all experienced at some level during our job search.
My master made me this collar. He is a good and smart master, and he made me this collar so that I may talk. Squirrel!
Now, our dogs have their squirrels. We also have our squirrels. So what I'd like to do is spend just a moment here talking about what our squirrels are during our job search. You can either put this in the chat, or if there are some things that you would like to share out loud, the things that are your distractions during your job search. So feel free to raise your hand or put it in the chat. What are the things that distract you? All right, I'm going to, I'd like to ask about a couple of these that are coming through. Someone up here put, let's see, phone calls from unknown numbers. Woody, would you unmute yourself and talk to us for just a moment about that?
Sure. So I get a lot of phone calls from numbers that my phone indicates are in the US, but they're from people that I don't know or haven't connected with, so a name doesn't come up, and they're not familiar. And sometimes they're from Michigan, sometimes from New Jersey, sometimes New York, California, so forth and so on. And more often than not, they're from offshore recruiters who generally I can't understand anyway. And if I make the mistake of reacting to it and just picking it up, then it turns into quite a distraction.
So it's interesting because you mentioned it being a distraction if you pick it up, but whether or not you pick it up, you've already been distracted because you're wondering, okay, I wonder if this is one of those recruiters. Should I pick it up? But oh gosh, what if it's somebody I really want to talk with and I don't answer it? Or what if it is someone calling me from their cell phone to schedule an appointment for my COVID vaccine next week? And so just that decision of whether or not to pick up that phone is a distraction.
Right.
So go
Yeah,
ahead.
If I don't pick it up, that's the 5-minute distraction. If I do pick it up, it turns into something much longer. They try to convince me to stay on the phone, even though I say, you have my email, send me a job description. I'll look at it the next day or two and get back to you.
Right.
Sometimes they're just very insistent.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. Ginger, you say that you are distracted by news on the browser homepage. Would you unmute yourself and talk about that for just a moment?
So if I'm going in to look at a job or to kind of research the company, and the browser comes up and I see something that triggers me on the, with the news on the, your Google comes up, or your whatever browser you have, you've got that homepage with all the news and the articles, and something just triggers you and I start going down rabbit holes. So, yeah,
that's it, going down rabbit holes or chasing those squirrels, whichever the case may be. And so having the browser there. Now I have a question for you, and I'm going to put you a little bit on a spot here. And for those of you who know me, you know I only do this out of love. So I don't want you to feel like I'm poking at you. But we'll talk about this more in a minute. Why do you have those browser pages open while you're doing your job search?
well, I'm looking into doing the company, why would I not want to research the company?
Okay. Hold that thought and we will come back to it. So please do hold that thought. All right. Let's see. Brian, you mentioned, I wonder if this could be applied to robotics. Absolutely, it does. When you do the research, putting out about brain breaks and all of that, it's amazing how much of that comes up dealing with technology and robotics and AI, and how these same sort of rest periods work. Now, I'm not a technical person, so I'm not going to attempt to explain how that fits, but there are some interesting things there. Jody, you mentioned that you are distracted by text messages. Would you unmute yourself and talk to us for just a moment, please?
Yes, text messages. Anytime the phone dings, you want to basically pull over and look at it.
Kind of goes along with that same, and I hate to say this, and I don't know if y'all can see this, but for Christmas, I got this nice little smartwatch. I think the only thing worse than a text message on your phone is when this thing on your wrist buzzes. When I first got it, it buzzes and it's just an automatic. You look at it and there's that distraction. Thank you. I'm gonna ask one more person. Rob, you say interesting jobs that you don't qualify for. Talk with me a little about that, please. You there, Rob?
That's actually Julia.
Oh, okay.
And I'm not,
sorry. Julia, you show up as Rob. So Julia, you wrote interesting jobs I don't qualify for. Thank you, Kathy. Julia, would you chat with us a little bit about that?
Does my audio work?
There you go. Yep.
Okay, good. Because in the past it's messed up. Yeah, as I'm looking for jobs, in the job search, you find lots of jobs that you don't qualify for, or at least I find lots of jobs that I don't qualify for, but they're really interesting and they're things that I might like to qualify for. So I get lost reading all the job descriptions, and then I get to the bottom and see, oh no, you don't qualify for that.
So I want you to hang on to that thought for a moment too, because in a little while we may talk about, or we will talk about, how to purposefully schedule those kinds of, quote, distractions into your time, because there are job descriptions that maybe you don't fit directly, but that trigger something for you where you're like, but that company's really cool, or maybe I do fit more than I think that I would. And so even those things that are distractions can be things that you intentionally work into your career search plan. So before I move on, are there any other squirrels out there that people would like to share with us before we move on? All right. So on we go then to common distractions. Now I'm going to slowly pull these up, and I want you to be looking for ones either that apply to you or that surprise you that they're there. So here we go. Smartphones, background noise, shoulder tapping, all right, there are many more. When I start looking at this list for me, pretty much everything except no dedicated workspace applies to me. And so you figure if even one of these things happens to you once a day, that's a whole lot of time wasted. Are there any of these, and if you would feel free to raise your hand, are there any of these that surprise you? There are a couple of them that I am definitely going to talk through, but there are a couple that may surprise you. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and keep going then, but anytime you want to raise your hand, please do. So the ones that tend to surprise people, start with this one, background noise. And this is something that, we say, well, we focus better. I'm able to focus better when I have something going on in the background. And that is, the problem is that listening to something in the background is a system one brain thing, right? Your work that you're doing in your career search is already system two. If you are listening to something and it grabs your attention, if you recognize the song that's on, or if you hear something on the TV that becomes that makes you turn around and look and go, what's going on? If you're aware of the content of any of those noises, they are distracting you, not helping you, because there's still part of your brain that's focused on listening. It could hear the new Josh Groban song come on, something like that. So if you recognize what's going on in those background noises, even though you don't realize it, you are distracted. Let's see, I see a lot of things going on here in the chat. Oh, Sally, analysis paralysis. That's a good one. You sit there and you stare at it forever and you're like, okay, now what do I do? As opposed to either taking action or moving on. So there's the background noise piece. The other one that I think really surprises people is email. Right now, no, I'm not going to do that to you. I was going to say, I want you to raise your hand if the first thing you do every morning, either when you get up or when you start doing your career search activities, is to check your email. The fact that our emails are on our phones now is absolutely one of the most distracting things we can have. And when we're in a job search, and this goes along with the person earlier who was talking about, that phone rings and you want to make sure you don't miss something. So think about the number of times that you look at your email every day, but then don't take action on it. You wake up in the morning, you scroll through, I need to respond to that. I'll respond to that this afternoon, You've scrolled through your email for 5 minutes. You haven't done anything. You've just made a note in your head of what you need to respond to later. Then something happens, that email bing goes off again. And here you go, look and scroll. Yeah, I'll look at that later. Okay, back to work. All that time that we spend glancing through our emails only to say, I'll take care of it later, is wasted time. Because you've taken the time to read it a first time, you've taken the time to read it a second time, maybe you've taken the time to read it a third time. But you're still not going to act on it for another 3 or 4 hours. So all of that time staring at the email hasn't produced anything. It's just time that you could have been spending doing something else. Others of these, I'm going to look at the chat right quick to see if there is anything. Let's see, Valerie, I can concentrate on 3 computer tasks that I need to give up. So we will we'll chat about that in a moment. Emails every morning, every hour. So that's kind of what we're talking about. Let's see. Sunlight coming in the window, making it clear that sitting at a desk any longer is no good. There are all kinds of things that we are tired by. Kathy, decision fatigue, absolutely. And y'all, it is a hard one to deal with. And I hope that a few of the little tasks that I give you today will help with that. Lack of structure, we're definitely going to talk about. I love this. Susan, I've gone back to my dumb watch because the smartwatch was so distracting to me. I get it completely. So folks, these look really good. And what everybody has in common is that we're all being distracted. Now, John, the NCAA basketball tournament is a legitimate legal distraction. I promise, because I'm distracted by that too. But we're going to talk in just a minute about how to put that into your search even in a way that is okay. All right. Okay. So the next one I want to focus on here in a little bit is multitasking. So keep that in your mind as well. There is a saying by Mr. T. Boone Pickens that says, when hunting elephants, don't get distracted chasing rabbits. Now, I will tell you, for me, the type of elephant hunting that I would be doing is with a camera on a photography safari. I wouldn't want to kill one of these sweet creatures. But this particular quote was so meaningful to one of my clients a while back that I hope you can see this little guy, that when he accepted his position, he bought me my little stuffed elephant here. And this is to remind me that when I'm hunting my elephants, not to get distracted chasing rabbits. What your elephants are in your job search are those things that need undivided, focused attention, period. That in order to get something done, you need to be able to focus on it for an hour or so without the distractions. I've heard some great ways that people have used this. One of my former clients, when she got her next role as a VP of operations in one of the software firms here, she had little door tags printed out for all of her employees that had an elephant on them. And these door tags, obviously, this is when we were still meeting, when we were still working in the office. Everybody in that company, it was a small software company, knew that if there was an elephant hanging on their door, on someone's door, that was not the time to walk in, even if it's an open door policy. That meant time that this person needed for uninterrupted effort. This is also one, by the way, that I've used with my daughter. When Caitlin sees the elephant on the floor outside of my office, that's my uninterrupted time that mommy needs to get her work done. So it's a great way to gently let your coworkers, your spouse, your kids, your grandkids, probably not the dog because the dog will think it's a toy and run off with it, but a way to let people around you gently know that this is time that you need to not be distracted. Because even the time that they take to tap on the door and for you to say, hey, not right now, I need a little bit of time, I'll be with you in a minute, that in itself is the distraction. So creating some of these symbols that can let the people around you know that your head's down right now and that you can't be distracted can be really, really helpful. So I'm going to move on here to just a couple of bullets. None of these are difficult. None of these are rocket science. But in order for you to best avoid distractions and to keep that focus where it needs to be during your career search, you want to turn off your phone and all alerts on it. Some of you right now are rolling your eyes and you're grabbing your phone and you're holding it close to you and you're going, oh my gosh, no, I can't do that. Something that, I'm going to get a call or I'm going to get an email about that next job. Folks, if it is a legitimate job for which they are truly sourcing external candidates and they want to talk to you, they're going to leave a message, period. If you were working right now, you wouldn't be able to just pick up that phone and talk to anybody anytime. The other thing picking up that phone does is it could be at a time when you are not prepared to talk. Maybe you have taken a break to watch the NCAA basketball tournament and the phone rings and you're like, yeah, hello? And it's someone who wants to talk to you about a job. But not answering that phone and having it off, one, slows down the distractions, and two, allows you to then go back and check your messages and prepare for that conversation when you call the person back. I know it's hard, okay? The next one, close all the tabs on your computer except the one you are using for each specific task. Now, Ginger, a minute ago, when we talked about your squirrel was getting pulled into news and stuff, when you mentioned it after that, it sounded like you were looking at news about the actual company. That's different. What I'm talking about here with tabs are people like my husband, who, if you open his computer, he's got 42 tabs open at a time. And they are on everything from bike racing, we own a bicycle shop, bike racing to bike stuff, to other work stuff, to the Texas Tech basketball game that starts at 1 o'clock, to all of these other things. And as long as you've got all of those tabs open on your computer, you don't need them all right that moment. And if you accidentally hit the wrong one, guess what? That's a distraction because you've hit the wrong one. Oh, wait, I didn't mean to look at that right now. And you click over and you're distracted again. I am going to open up the chat right quick because I see the numbers going crazy here. Is there anything? There we go. There we go. Okay. So it's just most people going, yep, that's me. Yep, that's me. Glad to hear it. Now the key is, can you change it from being you? Check your email twice a day, not all day long. I think we already talked a little bit about this. And the experts say, don't let it be the first thing that you do every morning. Get up, have your coffee, go for a run, do something for you, then check your email. And I'll show you in a moment a schedule that involves that. But what this prevents you from is that constant email scrolling. When you have those two designated email times, those are times to go through, delete emails that don't matter, and respond to the ones that need to be responded to. No more, I'll do that later, and having that be a wasted time. These are designated email checking times. Identify your elephants. Each of us has different elements. Some of us can do certain things more easily. Some of us have to be focused on other things. And so each of you needs to identify what your elephants are in order to be able to schedule that elephant time into your schedule. And stick to a plan. Respect your own time the way that you respect others. In a little bit, we're going to be talking about how to put together the schedule such that it honors your system 1 and system 2 brain. It lets distractions go down. It makes your search more effective. But if you don't stick to that plan, it doesn't work. Now, it's a strange thing, or maybe not a strange thing, but we've all been taught since birth that we look out for the other people first. So think about this. Let's say you have an appointment with Kathy to do a resume review, and you have a Zoom meeting scheduled with her at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon. I can almost guarantee you that at about 1:58, you are starting to log into Zoom, making sure that you're ready to talk to Kathy because you have an appointment with her. You know that her time is valuable. And so you're going to make sure that you're there on time. So why is it that on your calendar, when it says at 2 o'clock, I am going to write the cover letter and tailor the resume for this job at Indeed, why is it at 2:05, you're taking the trash out to the curb and you decide that then's the time to walk the dog? We don't respect our own time. as much as we respect the time of others. And folks, it is okay to be respectful of your own time. That's not selfish. It is allowing you to do what you need to do to get your work done. Any questions here before we shift gears just a little bit? Any hands up, or Kathy and Shannon, if you see any questions in the chat?
I see no questions.
Thank you.
I do see, Ginger said, I've heard schedule 2 hours at the end of every day to address email and complete any issues. So that's part of sticking to your plan, I guess, that we actually schedule things.
Yes, Ginger, I will address that more in just a moment. If you still have that question after we go through the actual schedule part, please ask again. Trixie, I saw that your hand was up.
I'll just wait.
Okay.
Thank you.
All righty. Okay. So for this next part, I want you all to just, hopefully you already have something by you that you were taking notes from the earlier part of Launchpad and such. If you don't, please grab a sheet of scratch paper, because we're going to do a little bit of an activity here on multitasking. Multitasking is one of those things that we all love to put on our resume. And I'm going to show you some things here about multitasking that maybe not. Okay. So get that sheet of paper next to you, please. When I say go, not yet, no cheating allowed, I want you to do two things. You are going to write the sentence, I am a great multitasker, and you are going to write down the numbers 1 through 25. Not like I have 1-25, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, because believe it or not, I am a great multitasker is 25 letters long. I'm going to set a timer here, and I want you to write that sentence and write those numbers as fast as you can. And as soon as you're done, jot down your time. Okay, so I'm going to start the timer here shortly. Again, you're going to write the sentence in numbers 1 through 25 as fast as you can. And then as soon as you're done, record your time. Do you have any questions about the task itself, folks? All right, here we go. So on your mark, set, go. Okay, that was 30 seconds. Hopefully everybody got it down everybody got it within the 30 seconds. Now this time, you're going to write that sentence again, and you're going to write the numbers again, but you're going to do it differently. Rather than writing, I'm a great multitasker, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you're going to go back and forth between the sentence and the numbers. So I1, the A2, the M3. You got it? All right. So this time, remember, you're going to go back and forth between the sentence and the numbers. And then once again, as soon as you're finished, look up and jot down your time. First person finished, if you would raise your hand so that I can see when someone finished, okay? All right, here we go. Remember, back and forth between the sentence and the numbers. On your mark, set, go. All right. So there may be some of you that didn't finish. Karen raised her hand on that one at 42 seconds. Karen, what was your time on the first run through? If you would, please.
29.
29. So it went from 29 to 42. You're doing the exact same thing. Now, let me tell you what's interesting here, folks. Or actually, raise your hand if, I'm not even gonna do that because I know the answer. All of you had longer round twos than you did round one. And what's interesting here is that we haven't even gotten to multitasking yet. What you were doing there was something that was called a switch task or a parallel task. Okay, we haven't even gotten to multi. With this is just going back and forth, back and forth. In a job search, this might be internet, cover letter, internet, cover letter, internet, cover letter. Okay, it's switch tasking. Your brain has to think differently. Now, I need a volunteer who is willing to indulge us just a little bit. So, and Shannon and Kathy, you better hope somebody volunteers or else I'm going to call on one of you. So who would be my volunteer? I promise it's painless. Raise your hand if I've got anybody. Oh, come on. All right. Kathy or
This is Trixie.
Oh wait, I've got two. Let's see. I've got two hands raised. Who have we got here? We have Trixie and who else raised your hand? I don't see it. Because we can definitely do two people here.
Valerie.
Okay, Trixie and Valerie. Y'all are up. And here's what we're going to do. Now we're going to multitask this. And you're going to do the same task, the switch task, I1, A2. And while you're doing that, you are going to say the alphabet aloud.
What?
So take your mute off. So you're going to write down the same thing you just did, switching tasks, and at the same time, say the alphabet aloud so we can all hear you. Are you ready? Trixie, you ready?
So we're gonna do like I1A?
Nope. You're going to be writing I and 1 while you are saying the alphabet. Okay? So all we're going to hear is you saying the alphabet. You got it?
Okay.
Valerie, you got it?
I think. I'm not.
Okay. So here we go. And remember, this is all happening simultaneously. So I'm going to start the clock. So we will hear you all. We will hear you both saying your ABCs as you go. And go.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, and Z. A, B, C, D,
there you go.
E, F, G.
Keep going until you get those numbers in the sentence written.
L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T,
U, W, X, Y, and Z.
W, X,
A, B, C,
Y, and Z.
G.
Now I know my ABCs.
All right, folks, we'll go ahead and
Okay,
stop
done.
there. That was 1 minute. So everybody, please give them a round of applause. But however you want to do that. Thank y'all so much for being the guinea pigs. Did either of you actually get through the end of the sentence and all the way through numbers 1 through 25 while you were doing that?
Yes.
You did? Okay. That
I had a technique though.
Well, that's it. That is what happens when we're multitasking. Now, I know this was a sort of a silly example, but we can all write that sentence. We can all write the numbers 1 through 25, and we can all sing the alphabet without thinking about it. But try to do all those things at once. That's multitasking. And that's what you're doing to your poor brain when you're trying to convince it that you can do all of these job search tasks back and forth. Okay? So thank y'all for playing. I know that it's that you go, man, this hit me really hard, that something this simple becomes a whole lot more difficult when you're trying to do these things simultaneously. Okay? Are there any questions right now before we move on? Oh, nice, John. John says now do the alphabet backwards. Oh, no, yikes. That would just be cruel for me to do that. Cruel and unusual punishment. So,
Courtney, this is
Yes, ma'am.
Kathy. What
Yes, ma'am.
screwed me up so badly is I got through early, but I only got to 20. And I thought, well, there's 25 letters. So I thought, well, I must have left off great. But there's only 20 letters in I'm a great multitasker.
Oh,
not
is there? 1, 2,
25.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
And so,
Oh, sorry. Oops. Okay.
Anyway,
But there
so
are 24 characters if you
Add in
count
the
the
spaces.
spaces between the words. Yeah.
Yeah, 24 characters.
oh, if you do the
But not 25.
spaces, no, there's only 4. Then there's 20. There's
24.
24 or
1,
20
2, 3,
letters.
4.
Yeah.
If you count the
Oh,
spaces.
sorry. I counted the one between multi and
And
task.
tasker. Well, so next time I do this, I will do it just numbers 1 through 24.
Okay, good, because I would have won, but I'm so glad that I didn't have to do the
Me too.
alphabet thing.
The alphabet that goes
That
along with it.
That was cruel.
Well, thank
seemed
you,
painful.
Valerie and Trixie. All right. Anything else there before we move on? The other thing is, and it got me, so if it makes you feel any better, I did this to myself last night so that, I never asked my clients, my people to do anything I wouldn't do myself. And what got me was the ticking of the clock in the background, because that's another one of those background noises, that tick, tick, tick. And I thought about taking it out and then went, nope, I'm going to leave it in, because other people, they also hear that tick. So it adds another dimension there. All right.
Hey, Courtney, here's another interesting thing. So Ginger said she was doing this exercise on the computer.
Huh?
Where most of us were doing it, using a pen.
Right.
So I can't even imagine doing it on the computer, because then that's a whole other piece of brain stuff that you have.
Exactly. Especially knowing where the keys are. If you learned how to keyboard like I did, or if you're hunting, pecking, and trying to find, that adds a whole new thing.
Right. And then John put in the sports team score. That
Y'all are awesome. Y'all are awesome. Thank you. The fact is that multitasking, in its scientific definition, is not a positive thing in terms of productivity. Multitasking, switch tasks, performing parallel tasks all cause brain fatigue and reduced productivity. McKinsey did some research that showed that tasks take 30% longer and you make twice as many errors when you are trying to do any of these things. Okay. So we want to try to do away with multitasking. Now let me back up a minute. You're still going to put it in your resume because it's still a word that companies like to hear. But when you are doing your own thing, we're going to use the scientific brain version definition of multitasking. And we're going to try to, if not completely doing away with it, schedule and plan your job search tasks in a way that it's not going to take you 30% longer with twice as many errors. Okay. So the key here is to make a list of tasks to accomplish and organize for sequential thinking. The first round where we did the activity where we just did the sentence and then did the numbers, that's sequential thinking. I know I have to write this sentence. I know I have to write these numbers. And then if we had then said, and then sing the alphabet after that, that's still sequential thinking. You're doing each thing in sequence. And that's the way, ideally, that you want to try to schedule your job search activities. So, bam, glance at this. This is probably overwhelming. What I did here is I just went through and wrote down, not all of, but many of the job search tasks that you should all be doing. Everything from applying to jobs, to documenting your progress, to preparing for interviews, to taking care of yourself, to following up with employers, writing those thank you notes, creating lists of target companies. It's a whole lot of stuff, folks. And I know one of the things I often hear from my clients is they sit down at their computers to do their job search, and there they sit for 2 hours, and then they look up and 2 hours has passed and they haven't done anything because of just the overwhelming number of tasks that need to be accomplished. But keep in mind that just because there are multiple job search tasks does not mean that you are multitasking or that you should be multitasking. So let's look at how we break these down. Now, what I'm about to show you are samples. Understand that you may find something that works better for your brain, but this is a good place to start. So first, we want to take all of this stuff that's here, and we want to put it into a format that can become routine for you. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to break down those job search activities into buckets, things that you can do weekly, things that you can do daily, things that you can do immediate. Now on the weekly piece, and I can't remember who said this earlier, but she was talking about the jobs. You get sucked down the rabbit hole of jobs that look interesting that you're not sure if you're qualified for, but
That was
really
Julia.
Thank you. So Julia was going through those things. These weekly tasks are a great way to address that. You know, you've seen this job and you say to yourself, I'm not a great fit for that job, but Monday is my day to look at new industries, to research different things. I'm going to put that on my daily list for Monday to look specifically at those kinds of jobs and try to think about how I might fit with those. Creating new lists of target companies, reaching out to recruiters. You know, this can be a simple email with a resume. I am writing to let you know of my availability to work for your client companies who may be in need for someone who does these things. Boom, 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 boom. That's probably not something that you necessarily need to do every single day, but is definitely something that's worth doing weekly. Participating in job groups, hint, 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 hint. And all of the other groups and learning activities. Right now during the pandemic, this last one under weekly is huge. Professional development and upskilling. Any time that you can learn something new, that you can add to your list of things that you know about, things that you can bring to a company, that's a good thing. So things you can do weekly. The next would be then daily. First thing you've got to do every day is sit down and plan out your day and prioritize your day's activities. What are your elephants? All of that. Research job openings, preparing application materials, checking and responding to email, making connections every single day. I know that networking is different, but you can still connect with people on LinkedIn. You can still ask for introductions to people, all of that. Documenting your progress and following up with potential employers. That stuff needs to happen every day. Now, I use the word immediate. I'm not quite happy with that word, but I couldn't think of anything else at the time. And these are the things that kind of happen spur of the moment. Maybe you don't have them on your weekly plan, but you got a call yesterday and now you have an interview at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Well, guess what? That becomes your elephant and that moves to the top of the day's priorities. And so just because you make a routine doesn't mean it won't change occasionally, but those changes are usually precipitated by external forces. And if you change your routine, it needs to be or if you change your plan, it should be an intentional change, not just something where you're not respecting your own time. Okay. So again, first step, all the things that you need to do in your career search, break them down weekly, daily, and immediate. Now, I'm going to show you a daily schedule. And I apologize, when I did this, it wouldn't let me print out the end of the column. Now, what I based this on is on some research done by the Dragon Group that you see in the second paragraph here, where they did research on people who are currently working and when they're most productive or how they're most productive. And people who take 17-minute breaks for every 52 minutes of work were the most productive people. Now, I will tell you that as I was finishing up this presentation this week, I set that timer for myself on that 52:17. And I will tell you, those 17-minute breaks, I wandered around the house the first couple of times. I didn't know what to do with myself for 17 minutes. But the 52 minutes, I literally set a timer for 52 minutes. Phone off, all of that. Timer for 52 minutes. And the 52 minutes flew by and I got a ton accomplished. And then the next 17 minutes. So what I want you to look at in this schedule, you'll notice all those things down the left that say break, break, lunch break and walk the dog, break, break, break. All of those breaks are 17 minutes long. Now on the right, those are all tasks that I put 52 minutes on. This was check and respond to search related emails, then review job alerts and choose 3 to apply for, prepare your application materials and apply. At 1:39, and then at 12:30 was following up with potential employers and reaching out to 3 new connections. That 1:39 was the upskilling. Do the Salesforce for customer service as part of the LinkedIn learning, then another break. The wrap up and document tasks. This is going back, looking at anything maybe that you didn't quite finish up during your 52 minutes. The documentation happens in 2 ways. One is, if you keep a spreadsheet, you're documenting what you accomplished. You're also documenting what needs to happen next with each of those things. What this said at the end of that line was, you also want to synthesize what you've done for the day. And this is one of the things that is really helpful to your brain. Up until now, you've been sort of in list mode, checking things off. At the end of the day, take a few minutes to write 3 sentences. That's all, no more than that. Write 3 sentences of what you feel you accomplished that day that was productive to your job search. Because what that then allows your brain to do is now to look at this whole body of work that you've done and say, hey, good job. Look at what you've done here. And it's an important wrap up to your day to be able to get out of list mode and to really give yourself a pat on the back for what you've accomplished. And then finally, that final email check for 52 minutes. Okay. I don't know that 2 hours of emails in one block is necessarily real productive for me. That would definitely be a squirrel rabbit trail kind of thing, because chances are, once you've looked through your email, there might only be 3 or 4 that need to be responded to. And by the way, we're talking here about email specific to your job search, not answering friends' email and all that. That happens later. But if you look at this, you'll notice this schedule started at 7 in the morning with some exercise. And that last 3:37 p.m. plus 52 minutes, whatever that turns out to be, is when the day ended. And it was before 5 o'clock. So all of these tasks were accomplished before 5 o'clock with 127 minutes of breaks, over 2 hours of breaks, to give your brain a chance to decompress in between, so that those 52 minutes are full-on productive minutes. Now, for those of you who may be struggling with the 52-17, there is other research that, if you look at the very bottom here, suggests doing what we call a 5 by 5 by 5. Take 5 breaks, or 5-minute breaks before 5 o'clock. To me, that's not enough now that I've experienced the 52-17, but those are still scheduled breaks where you set an alarm for those 5-minute breaks before 5 o'clock. And by the way, 5 o'clock does not count as a break. 5-minute breaks before 5 o'clock. Now, the type of break that you get to take during your 17 minutes or your 5 minutes is completely different. Your 17-minute break, you can take the dog for a quick walk. Take the dog for a quick walk, or you can grab lunch, or you can call a friend. When you're doing those 5 for 5 minutes, that is where you do absolutely nothing. You don't look at email. You don't look at Facebook. You don't listen to music. This is a great time to do a 5-minute headspace meditation. But when you're only doing 5 minutes, it needs to be 5 minutes of completely shutting down your brain and giving it a rest. Okay. All right, folks, I'm seeing a lot of things happening here in chat. I'm going to stop here for any questions that y'all have. Are there any questions in chat, or feel free to raise your hand? This person who said, I usually just work until I'm worn out. Sometimes that's 4, sometimes it's 7, but that's the point for everybody. If you work until you're worn out, by the time you're worn out, your brain is already not functioning at peak level. And your productivity is already lower. It's like they say, once you get thirsty, you're already dehydrated to a certain extent. When you're done, when your brain just says enough, you have probably gone too far. And the last work that you did, you might want to revisit because it might not be necessarily your best effort there. Okay. All right. So as we go on here, keep in mind, though, y'all, all the scheduling in the world only works if you can avoid the distractions and the temptations to multitask. So what we talked about last week with your brain and staying positive and being motivated, and now today with developing and holding on to that brain fitness that allows you to really do things at peak level and do a really good job on it. And then the schedule. When most people talk about time management, it's the schedule they talk about, but it's not just about the schedule itself. It's about breaks in the schedule. It's about scheduling your elephant time. It's about scheduling your elephant activities for times when you know during the day you are at your best. I'm a major morning person. Afternoon, I'm my brain is starting to be done. Okay. So final thoughts and takeaways. And then of course I'll open up for questions. You can better manage your time and conduct a more productive job search if you manage your mind. And that's both from the motivational part as well as the productivity piece. Set appointments with yourself and honor them. That's your schedule. Stick to it. Eliminate distractions as much as you can. Avoid toxic multitasking. There was actually a session that I went to at a conference that was called Avoiding Toxic Multitasking. That's how they talked about it there. Prioritize your elephants and practice your self-care. Take your frequent breaks, whether it's the 52 to 17 or the 5x5x5, and remember to utilize the resilience tools that you identified last week for those of you that were here. So what I'm hoping the last 2 weeks has provided for y'all is a different way to think about how you can protect your brain when you're executing a job search in a way to help you be positive, hopeful, and not constantly exhausted from the decision making and the fatigue of conducting a job search. Okay. All right. So I am going to stop there. What questions do y'all have, if any? Let's see.
Are you familiar with the Pomodoro time flow technique?
I do not know. What's Pomodoro time flow?
We had a presenter at Launchpad one time who talked about a Kanban board. I'm sure some people in here have used it. So he was talking about a Kanban board, and then his company, in combination with the Kanban board, used the Pomodoro technique where you work for full focus for 25 minutes, and there are Pomodoro timers. And then you take, I looked it up just to make sure. Then you take a short break that's 3 to 5 minutes, and then you work another 25 minutes and then take a break. And each time your breaks are a little bit longer until the fourth one is between 15 and 30 minutes. And then you start over again. But the whole point is that during that focus time, you are not to be interrupted.
Right. Right. No, I love that.
So, but it's something that was worked out along with Kanban, but it's supposed to really make your entire team more productive. And there are timers that will do that will tell you, take a break, go back to work, take a break, go back to work, and they'll work that all out for you.
Yep. And that's wonderful. So add that as a third possibility. So I think what we're seeing that the research says regardless is the focus time and the planned breaks are important, regardless of necessarily the time. Different research is going to say different things. And so it may be that you want to try out a couple of different methodologies, see what works for you. But the big deal being, take those breaks. Don't, that 5 minutes or that 15 minutes or the 17 minutes, you're going to be more productive during your focus time than if you just power through.
There seem to be a lot of questions about people who missed last week. And Courtney kindly gives a copy of her slides to Shannon. Shannon puts them in the newsletter. And then also Paul makes a video recording, which he edits and incorporates the slides into the recording. And that is accessible through our YouTube channel. And so you can either go on YouTube and put in Courtney's name eventually. It's not going to be immediate. There are a couple weeks in between. And so Shannon just put that link into the chat as well.
Jody, this was an interesting, Jody said, for me, breaks can be the distraction and I may have trouble getting back into what you were doing. So what I suggest for that, you still want to give your brain the break, but when the timer goes off, jot yourself a little note exactly what your thought was right that second, so that when you go back to it, it's there and you're not trying to think, okay, where was I? Now, that being said, there may be some times that you kind of get into the groove and it may be something that doesn't feel taxing. You're just kind of excited about it. Of course, go with the flow. But remember, what we're doing here is exercising or helping your brain with those breaks. And so if you can kind of train yourself to do that, it'll still be helpful. But I get it, Jody, for sure. Other thoughts, questions? Oh, man, Trixie, that's a rough one. And I think the answer to that is, in a way, yes. I can speak directly from the anxiety piece. We all know kind of when our body is feeling that tense, or you probably know if you're someone who experiences chronic pain, when your worst pain times are during the day and when maybe the pain is a little bit better, and maybe you schedule those elephant things during the times during the day that typically are not as hard on you, either from an anxiety standpoint or from a pain standpoint. Now, obviously, you can't directly control those things, but having the schedule and sticking to it and doing these things can sometimes help with that anxiety as well, because you have structure and you know that you have a plan to fall back on, and there's often some comfort from that in people without just feeling like you're overwhelmed and just a ton of stuff going on. Okay.
I have a question that's sort of related to that. You know how sometimes when you're concentrating, you are really in the zone, and you're there and you're not thinking about anything else, and the words, are just flowing, and you are hot, and all of a sudden your timer goes off like you're supposed to take a break, but you are in the zone. So do you still, I think the Pomodoro technique says, oh yeah, you take a break then too. But what if you're so focused that you're not feeling pain because your brain is in that place?
So there's some work done by someone called Csikszentmihalyi, and they talk about flow. And flow is when you are in that place at work or wherever, where it's just rolling. It's just, you're in the groove, you're flowing down the river, everything is just going with you. I would still say let the timer go off. And then that's the time. Remember that third column, which was the more immediate tasks? It may be that you make a conscious decision at that time to say, you know what, I am really in flow right now. I'm going to reset that timer for maybe half of the 52 minutes or whatever, and I'm going to hang with this, but then you're going to reschedule your break. So it's an intentional decision on your part to continue to work because you are in flow, not just blowing through the timer. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. Then that resetting of the timer becomes your distraction.
Exactly. But yes, it does. It's hard. It's hard to, I think it's just, there's no way to totally eliminate distractions. Just, how do we, within the environment that each of us works, how do we limit the number of them as much as possible? Obviously, we're not going to rid ourselves of all of them. I'm being curious to get creative juices flowing. Do that. I seem to need to have no deadline, no schedule to stop. At times, I can only get to this deeper use in the middle of the night when I'm absolutely free of any sense of scheduled time. What I can tell you, Valerie, is, and all of you, listen to your own body and your own mind. Okay. We're all different. And every bit of research in the world, I mean, even just in this presentation, we've talked about 3 different ways to schedule those breaks. And I think overall, it's about figuring out what works best for you, and whatever it is, honoring the time that you give to that. If your inspiration comes from 2 to 4 a.m. in the morning, let it come from 2 to 4 a.m. in the morning. But make it, even if it's not scheduled, make it a routine, because it's easier on your whole psychological, intellectual system to have that thing going on. But folks, it's all about finding what works for you.